time for another episode of the Rose Quinn podcast. And we have an amazing guest. I say that all the time, like we and us, but it's really just me here, just Rose. Anyway, I have an amazing guest today for you. I'm so excited. It is the lovely dream agent, Carly Watters. She is with P.S. Literary Agency, and it was a dream come true to be able to interview her for you guys. So we're going to get to that later. You can skip all the rest of this if you just really want to get to that and hear her amazing advice. But please come back because I'm going to tell you about some cool books and this cool writing method that I found. So, my favorite books of the episode, I kind of went back in time for this first one. The Midwife's Revolt by Jodi Daynard. And again, me, I don't really pronounce things well. So this book was originally published in 2012, and I read it a few years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, but it's on my list of books to talk about because I remember being really entranced by it. So let me read you the blurb. On a dark night in 1775, Lizzie Boylston is awakened by the sound of cannons. From a hill south of Boston, she watches as fires burn in Charlestown in a battle that she soon discovers has claimed her husband's life. Alone in a new town, Lizzie grieves privately but takes comfort in her deepening friendship with Abigail Adams. Soon, word spreads of Lizzie's extraordinary midwifery and healing skills, and she begins to channel her grief into caring for those who need her. But when two traveling patriots are poisoned, Lily finds herself with far more complicated matters on her hands. She suspects a political plot intended to harm Abigail and her family. Determined to uncover the truth, Lizzie becomes entangled in a conspiracy that can not only destroy her livelihood and her chance at finding love again, but also lead to the downfall of a new nation. This is historical fiction for me, can be hit or miss. I don't know why. It's just, it really has to have a certain quality for me to be super interested in it and to make it all the way through, and this one definitely did. It is a long book. I remember that much. I read fast, and it took me a little bit longer to read this one, but the story and the characters, everything is just so expertly woven together, and you care incredibly about these people and what's going on with them, and it's really beautifully written. So if you enjoy historical fiction and you're looking for something new to read, I would definitely recommend The Midwife's Revolt. The next book I want to talk about is completely different than that one. It's one that I love, and I'm so excited for the next one in the series to come out. It's One of Us is Lying by Karen McManus. You know me, and I love all things YA and crime and murder and whodunit mysteries, and this is definitely one of those. Let me read the blurb for you. Pay close attention and you might solve this. On Monday afternoon, 5 students at Bayview High walk into detention. Bronwyn, the brain, is Yale-bound and never breaks a rule. Addie, the beauty, is the You guys, I can't read. Addie, the beauty, is the picture-perfect homecoming princess. Nate, the criminal, is already on probation for dealing. Cooper, the athlete, is the all-star baseball pitcher. And Simon, the outcast, is the creator of Bayview High's notorious gossip app. Only Simon never makes it out of that classroom. Before the end of detention, Simon's dead, and according to investigators, his death wasn't an accident. On Monday, he died, but on Tuesday, he'd planned to post juicy reveals about all 4 of his high-profile classmates, which makes all 4 of them suspects in his murder. Or are they the perfect patsies for a killer who's still on the loose? Everyone has secrets, right? What really matters is how far you would go to protect them. So I'm a sucker for a whodunit mystery like this, and kind of like a locked room, like they were all in there, and somebody had to have done it, right? You find something out about the 4 high-profile classmates who all have a big, juicy reveal coming about them that, you know, I'm sure tons of readers can relate to all or one or a couple of the characters, which just really makes this real. Obviously, it's dramatized. This probably doesn't happen to people in their everyday high school lives, but it's there's aspects of these characters that we can all relate to and understand, and high school's hard and terrible for a lot of people, and this is a really well done, intriguing, and captivating novel. So if you like all of those things, I definitely recommend it. And there's a second one coming out that's One of Us Is Next. So Karen McManus wrote another book in between these two, but that's called Two Can Keep a Secret, which I have sitting on a large pile of books. But the next one in this series is One of Us Is Next. And that one comes out at the beginning of next year. So you still got time. Even if you have a long to-be-read pile like I do, you still have time to read it. So those are my favorite books of this episode. If you've noticed, I've started to do episodes more regularly. I've had some things going on in my life that have caused me to slow down a little bit, but I'm getting back on track. I have a lot of great guests for you through the end of this year, and I'm so excited. We're going to be doing like alternating author agent podcasts, so that'll be super fun. So we'll get to hear from a lot of different agents and authors, and it's going to be awesome. But one thing I wanted to share with you guys that actually Kim Chance, who's an awesome author who has a book, Seeker, coming out. It's her sequel, coming out in September. Go check her out. She shared something on her Instagram stories that led me to Lisa Maxwell, who is also an author. She shared this really interesting way she writes goals or sets goals for herself that helps her in her writing. So I tweeted about it. You can go look. It's like the picture with all the little squares and the numbers and all the goals on the side. But what each square represents, you can also check this out on Lisa Maxwell's Instagram. She explains it too, but for those people who just want to hear about it right now, each square is like a time frame. So you could do 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Each square for me is 10 minutes because my children can't really let me go can't let me go more than 10 minutes without needing something or asking a question. So 10 minutes is usually how long I can get in like a single sitting. Sometimes not even 10 minutes, but once you've hit the end of that 10 minutes, you write how many words you wrote in that time frame in the box, and then you keep going. And you could probably, depending on your writing time or however you have it, you could do 4 boxes on a line and then stop, or 3 or 2 or whatever. I did 3, so I did 3 bouts of 10-minute writing, and then on the right hand side you write your total word count. And the whole thing about it is setting small, realistic goals for yourself. So instead of being like, I am not going to finish until I reach 5K for today, I started at 500 words because my goal for each day is a little over 1,000. But you could set, 1K, 2K, 3K, 4K, 5K. And then as you hit each goal, you're like, okay, making progress. It's the idea, I think, of starting small first. And then, as you get into it, when you hit that bigger goal, even if you don't hit the bigger goal, then you're still like, oh, well, I still did a lot today. So that's something that really helped me get a lot of words, even when my kids were being ridiculous and being loud. Like the day I wrote almost 2,700 words, my kids were literally like at my feet screaming like banshees, playing Barbies, being crazy. So it's still possible. I didn't know I could be so successful doing stay-at-home mom stuff. My first week of stay-at-home mom stuff, I tried to write before they woke up and would do it, after my husband got home or before I went to bed, which wasn't really successful because you're tired and exhausted after a long day with kids, but this was helpful. Even just if I only did a couple squares, 20 minutes, at least I'm getting some words in instead of nothing. So now for the main event, which I know everybody is so excited about. Carly Watters. I first connected with her when I interviewed Andrea Dunlop for the podcast in 2017. I think I interviewed her the first year, or maybe early 2018, but Carly Watters is her agent, and I was like, oh yeah, let's connect with all the agents, and I've just kind of silently followed her on Instagram until I got the guts to start doing agent podcasts. So she is at P.S. Literary Agency, and she's wonderful, very well-spoken, and just gives a lot of great feedback and information on her experience in the industry, and she answers those same questions about queries that Devin did in the last interview. So you'll get a different agent's perspective, and I think the thing to take away from it, and like she will mention, her views on query no-nos or things that'll make her stop reading or favorite things to see in a query, are personal. But I think it's good to hear from agents and for aspiring authors who get all of those emails that are like, it just wasn't a right fit for me. You see that there's still real people behind it that, love books too and want to support authors and all of that. So I'm excited for this second agent podcast, and let's go ahead and get to know Carly Watters. So, Carly, can you tell us what drew you to publishing and being a literary agent and kind of your journey thus far?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a kind of a classic start. I was an English grad for my undergrad program, just kind of searching for ideas about what career I wanted to have. I started off in a teaching program, a concurrent education, so I was doing my undergrad at the same time I was doing some teacher's college. And after some teaching placements, I really didn't think it was my calling, which was disappointing because that's kind of what I was counting on as an English grad. So I thought, what is it that I actually want to do? What is it that I actually loved about being in the English program? And for me, it was really just, the books themselves. I liked studying them and reading them. And so I just didn't really know how to translate that into a career. But I started to kind of unpack the whole concept of how do these books actually show up on the shelves? Because I think for a lot of people, it's very assumed that, books just appear. But there's this whole industry behind them and how they actually make their way to the bookstores. So, there's a whole industry and there's so many careers behind it, which, led me to the rabbit hole of, how am I going to get into this business? So I started researching some post-grad programs about how to get into the publishing business. And there's some different opportunities. So obviously some people go right from their undergrad right into a different internship, opportunity. For me, I wanted to get some sort of post-grad education. So I started looking into master's programs, different kind of certificate programs, and I landed on a program in the UK in London called City University. It was a one-year master's program, and it had a built-in internship into it. Wow. So for me, that was kind of great because I could get the hands-on experience that I needed, get my master's degree, move to a foreign city, all in 1 year, kind of cross a bunch of things off the list. So so I started thinking about, what different types of publishing careers there could be. And as soon as I landed on an agent, I definitely thought that was the best part of the business. I think, and for a lot of people, this is, a great thing, but for me, I just didn't want to be siloed into one department. I liked that agents were able to do so many things. You get to discover the writers and help them put together the ideas and the package, and sell it, and all the different rights, being strategic about their career moves, helping with marketing and publicity. And so for me, it was just a way to exercise a lot of creative muscles. And it just seemed like the dream job to me.
I definitely think it's a dream job, and you're definitely a important, and in a very important role as somebody who's an aspiring author. Literary agents are up there on our list of people we need to get to.
Yeah, and we're normal people, so don't hold us too high on a pedestal.
No, I think that's what I love about these interviews too, is I sort of had a fear when I was reaching out to agents. I was like, what if they're like, no, never. But I was like, no, they're normal people. They love books too. Like, of course they're going to be excited just to talk about it. something that's
Yeah,
good
and
just
that's
to.
how our job happens. Like, I'm not the creator. I rely on all of these wonderful creators to supply me with the projects to sell, because I don't have a career unless I have writers on my roster. So I'm
Yes.
very respectful of the process, the writers that hand over their thoughts to me.
I love it. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad you found your path. I toyed with wanting to be a teacher for a while too, but I have a best friend who's a teacher of 7th graders. She teaches math, and I know that I could never do it. I don't have enough patience for that.
No, I know. And I think, because I was somebody who, a lot of people are kind of nerdy in this business. So I'm somebody that was, pretty nerdy kid. And I just thought that you going back to school as a teacher, you're going to be going back and teaching all the nerdy kids like you. But, sometimes it's babysitting. Sometimes it's remedial work. So, it's not always, teaching Shakespeare to 12th graders.
Yes, definitely not. So let's talk about your love for books. So you majored in English, and how was your love of books before that? How did it begin?
So for me, it just started with my mom. I think she was a librarian for her career, so that was something that was pretty built into my identity. The thing that we would do as a family. Go to the library, take out our books, and so it was a very, very early just passion of mine. I was somebody that would, ask, what is the maximum amount of books that I can take up from the library, and
yes.
stuff them all in a bag and go home with them. So it was something where it was never a question. It was never, something that I had to kind of take on board as an identity. It was just something that was just always a part of me. And I've loved books from the beginning.
I love that. I have vivid memories of taking the train downtown Portland with like 15 books in my bag that I had to return before I could get any more books. I was definitely the same way. I always had a stack of library books around.
And I never wanted to lose them. I didn't want to disappoint the librarian, so I had to keep them all in the same place in my room.
Yes, definitely. So let's talk about the fun stuff real quick. Let's talk about queries. So I've got a few questions on them, but I want to start by asking you what your thoughts are on queries sticking to that specified formula. So not each agency's submission guidelines, but, just including, the introduction, the who, what stakes, and not being gimmicky with it or trying to, because you see those things out there where people try and to be a little creative and break free from the rules. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I totally understand as creative individuals how you want to step outside the box, but
yes.
I honestly believe that the rules need to be followed. And for me, it's just not cute to break them, because this is your first kind of business relationship, one of the closest business relationships you're going to have. So for me, it's like a cover letter for a job.
Yeah.
And, we read hundreds of them at a time, usually, in one sitting, I'm reading hundreds, or, we're getting thousands a month. So
crazy.
For me, if you're trying to be too cute and trying to divert too much, it's hard for me to know what your book is about.
Yeah.
So, I just don't want writers to make it harder on themselves. So I do believe it in the process, in the formula.
I think that's good to hear. I think writers try and help each other out and critique queries a lot, which can be helpful. I think it can also go the opposite way at times if you're not careful. But I think I have seen a lot of those where, people are trying to break the rules to stand out in a different way, but that it could backfire for doing so.
The only way to stand out is to write a really great book.
Yes.
Everybody's trying to do the same thing, but, the really great books stand out. And so if you just bury the lead and bury the query and all this other, words, then it's hard for me to find that great project. So definitely make it easy on yourself and follow the rules.
Perfect. That's good to know. What, for you, in your experience of reading lots and lots and lots of queries, is your number one query no?
For me personally, and obviously, we could talk for hours about how subjective, reading queries is and,
yes.
Our personalities and our tastes. But for me, I don't like queries that are too long.
Okay.
I feel that, as a writer, you need to be able to summarize your thoughts. You need to be able to condense them, and you need to be able to pitch your project. And it's not really fun. It's not always very comfortable to think of yourself as a salesperson, but
Right.
you really have to be that first advocate for your book. And, you have to be the person that's going to sell it to me, the first person that can also, as I said, help you in this process. So if it's too long, I think, okay, maybe this person doesn't know what their book is about, or they don't know what the selling features are of this project, or they don't know what the comp titles are, or they're just not aware of, the market, and as we said, the rules of querying. So I get quite put off by very long queries. I just don't feel like the writers are kind of understanding exactly what we need from them, and I just don't see them as being prepared for the industry.
Yeah, I think that, as someone who has written queries and really struggled with them, I think that queries can first be, if you're struggling with that, trying to condense what really needs to be in there, that can kind of sometimes give you a clue that there's something wrong with your manuscript, but also it's making sure you're not like spoiling everything. You really are trying to keep it to, that first act and just try and get the agent to be interested in reading the story, but not give them a synopsis. And I think sometimes that's a struggle too. You know everything as a writer in your head of what happens, but you have to stop yourself from giving it all away.
Exactly. And it should read like back cover copy. So, what you imagine the eventual back cover copy of your book to be. It should be salesy. And I also feel like writers, just they feel like this is their one opportunity to, communicate and speak to an agent. So they feel like they have to lay it all out. I don't need you to lay it all out for me. If I like your book and I like your concept, we're going to have a phone call and, we're going to build a relationship and a rapport. So, you don't have to use that one query letter as the opportunity just to bear all. The purpose is to hook us on this one book project. And that's where it all starts.
That's great. Good advice for sure. Something to remember. Another thing to remember about queries. So what things in a query or first pages that you get will make you stop reading?
It's a tough question again, so personal, but for me, I have pretty kind of commercial market taste. So for me, I'm always thinking, the consumer and the reader, they have so many things to distract themselves. There's social media, there's Netflix, there's magazines, there's so many things to take us away from reading that, we don't need barriers to get into books. And so I really feel like things need to be really high stakes, lot of momentum. So if something is kind of lacking a crisis or a critical moment, or the pace is off, that's an opportunity for me to put the book down. And so I don't want the consumer to have that same opportunity to put the book down. So it has to be powerful. It has to be exciting, the command of prose from page one, because you have to get me invested in the idea that I want to spend 8 hours with you in these words.
For sure.
So that's really the important thing for me, is just making sure that pace is there, the urgency and the stakes are there, because we have to compete with a lot of things.
So many things, social media and Twitter and just our normal day-to-day lives and kids.
Exactly.
Lots of things that can make you, put the book down.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of leisure time anymore, right?
No.
So if you want somebody to spend their leisure time with you, you're asking a lot of somebody, really. And, there's a lot of people that are only going to read one book a year, or they're going to listen to an audiobook. There's all these different types of readers out there, but what they all want is something that is going to compel them and be escapist and take them away from their life and be entertaining. For
sure. I think that is what we all strive to do, but it can definitely be difficult to perfect your craft enough that you get to that point.
Exactly. A lot of self-editing.
Yes, lots of self-editing. So let's talk about more on the flip side of it. What's your favorite things to see in a query? What makes you super excited?
For me, it's, firstly that they get my taste right, so it is something that I actually want to read. But second, I really like when they get their comp titles accurate. So comp titles meaning, the comparative titles that you're kind of using to place your book within the marketplace. So if those are really spot on, if they're really relevant, they're really exciting to me in a way that's fresh as well. Those comp titles can really take things to the next level.
I think so too. I feel like I've seen a lot of conversation about comp titles lately on Twitter and just the importance of them. Do you feel like there's a time limit for what comp titles you can use? Like anything, you shouldn't use anything, 2 years or older, or how do you feel about that?
That's a great question. So I usually advise people not to use things that are 5 years old or older.
Okay.
2 years feels like a little bit restrictive. I mean, I love it when they're super recent. But the other thing is, books have to stand the test of time.
Yeah.
So that 5 year range just gives you, a little bit of leeway in terms of, what book can last 5 years, and as opposed to, just the past year or something like that. So I think anything past 10 years definitely feels too old. If you want to use a classic, that's fine, but don't use all classics.
Yeah.
It could be one classic, or it's, the classic meets this like super modern thing. That's also fine. If you want to use TV shows or films, that's also totally fine with me. Like if you just want to place it where it is in pop culture, that's totally fine. But yeah, it has to be something that sounds really smart and salesy. So you really have to think about how those they're coming across. If they are, I also tell people not to pick something that's completely ubiquitous, because it loses its sense of place and time, because if something becomes a huge franchise,
yeah,
it's not really a anymore, it's a pop culture moment.
Yeah.
So avoid those types of huge projects that are no longer really books. They're a cultural movement. So really, yeah, stick to books that are timely, and really shows your understanding of what's going on in the marketplace and what's selling. So you don't have to pick stuff that's all incredible bestsellers, but don't pick things that are too quiet either, that nobody's heard of. So you kind of have to find that middle ground.
I think that's really good advice, and something that I feel like comp titles can be really difficult for people if they're not reading in their genre, reading what's out there, which I always say that you can't be a writer if you're not a reader too, because you have to be able to. I think reading is so crucial to being able to know what's doing well and the formulas that people are reading and loving, and especially for comp titles.
I also think it's an important part of being a literary citizen. Yes. I mean, just buying books and contributing to this industry, networking with other writers, sharing what you're reading about on Twitter and social media, finding ways to talk about the books and authors that you want to support. It's just part of being a fan and being engaged in your business.
For sure. I think that's super important. Don't get lost in just the writing. The reading is I think the reading is way more fun anyway, most of the time for me. So
it's your escapism as well.
Yes, it definitely is. Always has been. So do you have any tips or golden rules that you want to share with authors who are currently querying or getting ready to query?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I would say focus on your top agent choices first. Sometimes I hear from writers, should I hit all the heavy hitters in the first round, or should I save some? I say don't save any top picks just because you're scared that the draft isn't ready.
Yeah.
What if it is ready and you get all these offers and you've never queried, your dream agent? So I think that, you kind of have to make tiers and kind of groupings of who you want to query, but stay pretty organized and stay really hopeful. On the flip side of it, I've also seen authors that kind of query, and then they get down to, a list of agents that maybe they wouldn't accept an offer from, if they were to offer, and that's just a waste of time. So, for themselves. So, if that doesn't end up being the book that lands you an agent, you need to think really hard about whether you want to go back and work on your next book, or do a lot of careful research about, the agents that you want to keep on that querying list. Don't just query and query, just because you're distracted from, or scared about getting back to another book. Sometimes people have to query multiple books before they find an agent.
For sure.
So it's a long process, and I don't want to call it a game, because it's your career, and you should take it really seriously and really try to find the best business partner for you.
Yeah, I think that is definitely an important piece of it. I've had some conversations with other writers, and one of them was telling me he's going to query like batches of 50 agents at a time, and I'm like, oh no, don't do that. I'm like, you should learn about them and do it in smaller batches. I'm like, you want to be able to, I think while you can't always have a personal note for each agent, because if you haven't followed, seen something on Twitter or, met them at a conference or whatever, that's fine. But I definitely think putting in that research, because it is a business, and, you're it's kind of like an interview. You're starting, that business relationship. You want to make sure you're putting your best foot forward, for sure.
Yeah. And it's an interview both ways, right? Like, it has to be a fit for both people.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of authors think that agents are in the position of power. They're the ones making the decisions, but it's the authors that are in the position of power, because, they're querying these large groups of agents. They get to choose who's the right fit for them. So don't forget, who's in the power position there. It's the author who's selecting the right business manager for them.
Yeah. And I think what you said earlier about how, the writer and the author brings you the work too. I think, we need to think about it more in that, instead of just like offering up our measly little work in progress or manuscript, like, oh, please take me, have some confidence and be like, no, this is what I did and you want it.
Exactly. You should be proud of the work you're putting out there, or it's not ready to be put
exactly.
out there.
Yes. So speaking of, that business relationship, what else do you look for in an author? When you've gotten their query and the pages and you're interested and you're on that phone call?
For me, there's a short list of things. I'm looking for things like, do they have enough ideas to have a long career? Because I don't want to work with someone who just wants to do one book. If we're going to get invested in this process and work together, then ultimately we have to make sure that there's a lot of ideas to go around, and many, many books to come. So that's one of the important things for me. Digital literacy is a big one. Just learning how to work the internet. I don't expect everybody to have a Twitter page and Facebook and every social media to ever be in existence. But you do have to definitely know how to work a few of those key methods of communicating with your readership. And so even if it's just having a really simple website as a landing page and taking on one bit of social media, but even if you don't want to take it all on, it's just knowing how to work within those spaces. And that just tells me that the author is aware of what's going on in the marketplace, and they know how to be the author that's going to move a lot of copies in today's environment, and that requires a lot of just a lot of research on their end. So there's that. I also think being kind of flexible, not kind of trying to railroad the conversation, that's a big thing.
Okay.
Also, just being supremely talented. That's it. At the end of the day, I just want to work with people that are, going to write amazing books, and so that's how I do my job best, is when I represent really great projects that are saleable.
I love it. Those are good things to keep in mind. And I think that, there's a lot of emphasis that maybe just aspiring authors put on themselves about social media and having like this great platform and all that. But what I've heard from, a lot of agents is that that's not crucial. That's not going to like kill you in the beginning if you don't have that. So that's good to know, because I think a lot of people put a lot of stress on that before they, have even started moving forward in the process. Yeah, because there's no career
unless there's a great book. So
yeah.
You have to work on that.
Yes. Well, I think those are all wonderful tips and things for people to remember. So let's talk a little bit right now about what you're looking for right now. So what's on your manuscript wish list?
Oh, goodness. So it's pretty timeless. I mean, for me, I'm always looking for family dramas. It doesn't have to necessarily be domestic suspense, but I'm looking for, sweeping love stories or huge tragedies, historicals, something that, just has a lot of really human elements to it. I like things like Commonwealth by Anne Patchett, the type of, complex family stories. I also like really unique memoirs. I'm looking for some really great memoirs. I mean, there's been so many of the past couple of years, like Heartland and things like that. Just, stories that haven't been told yet. I really feel passionately about bringing those into the world. I'm looking for, lots of diversity. I'd love some great diverse rom-coms like I Used to Chat Last. I love that project. So things like that. And yeah, I mean, I feel like, the women's fiction upmarket, book club space is where I feel most confident and what I like to read and what I like to sell. So anything that's new and fresh in that space.
Awesome. That sounds lovely. I'm sure there's lots of people out there who are listening and are like, oh, yes, let me get on that website and hear you. So this is my favorite question to ask everybody, just as book lovers. I think it's always good to share what our favorite book is right now. So this is not your favorite book of all time. This is not anything like that, because that's a hard question to answer. Just what your favorite book is that you've read recently.
Well, I was just talking about on Instagram this week. The best book that I've read in probably almost this year is the one that I'm reading right now. So it's called The Most Fun We Ever Had by Claire Bardo. It just came out in June, and I just started reading it. I was just in LA, and I picked it up for my flight, and I was just obsessed with it. It's a really, really wonderful, going back to the whole family dramas thing, it's a really wonderful family drama about parents and four daughters, and, and just how their lives take these really winding paths. So yeah, I'm quite obsessed with that, and I've been sobbing and laughing and telling everybody about it. So it's a very emotional read, and exactly the type of thing I love.
That's awesome. That sounds wonderful. Did you pick it up in the airport, or you just knew you were going to read it on your trip?
Well, I had only brought one book on my trip, which is kind of shocking for me, and I finished it. So I was downtown in LA at the last bookstore, kind of browsing and checking it out, and I came across this book, and I'd seen it on a number of Bookstagrammers' Instagram stories, just raving about it. So I just kind of picked it up on a whim, and I'm so glad I did. It kept me company the whole way home.
That's awesome. That's sometimes the best way to find a book. It's just on a whim. Just take a chance.
Yeah, it was worth it. I recommend it to everybody.
I love it. Well, Carly, thank you so much for chatting with me today and letting us pick your brain about some things for queries and being a literary agent. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me and thinking of me for the podcast. If anybody wants to keep in touch online, it's at Carly Watters on Twitter and Instagram.
All right, guys, how amazing was that? Carly is a fountain of knowledge, and I'm so happy that she was on the podcast and able to share her wisdom with us. So I hope you learned something today. Please make sure to rate and review this podcast. I know it might not seem like a very big deal, but it can definitely help me and help more people learn about the podcast. Please share what you learned from this on Twitter or on Instagram with me and help get a conversation started so more people can listen to these agent podcasts and learn about the industry and the process, and connect with me at Rose Quinney, Quinny. I'll see you next time. Or not see you, but you know what I mean.